The night felt unusually calm when I parked in my driveway, the car's headlights casting long shadows on the ground. Just as I was about to open the door, a quick movement caught my attention. A cat had jumped onto the hood. She wasn't just any cat. There was an intense urgency in her green eyes that seemed to plead for something. Then with a meow, she jumped down and looked back, almost as if inviting me to follow her. I paused, my heart racing. What could she possibly need from me? Why did it feel like she was trying to communicate? I stepped out of the car slowly, keeping my gaze on the stray. To my surprise, she didn't run away. Instead, she walked a few steps ahead and paused, turning to look back at me, waiting. Deep down, it felt like this was meant to be. She wanted me to come along. "Okay, where to?" I whispered, feeling a mix of curiosity and concern. She guided me down the street, past parked cars, and toward a neglected lot near my neighborhood. This area was overrun with weeds, a forgotten piece of land wedged between two houses. Suddenly, I heard them. Tiny, high-pitched meows coming from underneath some wooden planks. I knelt down, shining my flashlight into the shadows. There, nestled in a small makeshift bed, were 3 small kittens, huddling together. Their fur was tangled, and they blinked up at me, wide-eyed and vulnerable. Luna, as I later decided to call the mother cat, nudged my leg, producing a low, urgent meow. She wasn't simply showing me her kittens, she was seeking help. My heart tightened. I had never rescued cats before, but leaving them here was out of the question. The air was growing colder, and I couldn't imagine how long these little ones had been waiting for someone to notice. Taking a deep breath, I realized this night was evolving into something unexpected, but walking away wasn't an option. I reached out gently toward the kittens, unsure of how they would react. As I approached, the smallest one flinched, pressing against its siblings. The second kitten, an orange tabby, gave a tiny hiss, clearly nervous. But the third, a fluffy gray, looked up and made a soft, trusting sound. Luna circled me, rubbing against my leg and nudging her kittens, encouraging them. She wanted me to help. "All right, little ones, it looks like we're in this together," I said softly, carefully gathering them up. They were so light that they barely filled my hands. I nestled the tiny kittens into my hoodie, feeling their rapid heartbeats against my chest. Luna, their mother, trailed closely behind as I made my way back to the car. When I opened the door, she leaped in, settling into the passenger seat with a sense of ease. It was as if she instinctively knew this was the best chance to protect her little ones. As I drove home, it struck me that I hadn't really thought this through. Cats had never been my thing. Life was already busy enough without adding 4 new responsibilities. Yet, when I glanced over at Luna, those calm, wise eyes of hers seemed to suggest that she had orchestrated the entire encounter. I hadn't rescued them. Luna had chosen me. With that realization came the unsettling awareness that I was in uncharted territory. That evening, I transformed my spare room into an impromptu nursery. I used an old laundry basket lined with towels for their bed and set a dish of water nearby, hoping Luna would hydrate. I wasn't well versed in caring for newborn kittens, but I figured warmth and food were essential. The room carried a faint scent of dust and fabric softener, but Luna and her kittens didn't seem to mind. She curled herself around them, and for a moment, I let myself believe things would work out. Around 3 a.m., a loud, distressing cry pulled me from sleep. This wasn't the usual soft meowing. It felt urgent and alarming. I rushed to the room to find Luna pacing anxiously by the basket. The kittens were still huddled together, but something felt off. My heart sank as I noticed one of them, Shadow, lying still. With my heart racing, I reached in to lift her gently. Her little body was limp and cold, barely showing signs of life. A wave of panic washed over me. I had no experience with this kind of situation. Grabbing my phone, I called Sarah, my closest friend and the only person I knew who had successfully fostered animals. "I need help," was the first thing I said when she answered. "One of the kittens isn't moving." Within 15 minutes, Sarah arrived, her hair disheveled from sleep, but her focus unwavering. She quickly assessed Shadow, her face growing serious as she examined the frail little creature. "She's weak, likely malnourished. We've got to warm her up and take her to a vet first thing in the morning." I wrapped Shadow in a soft fleece blanket, cradling her against my chest in an effort to share my warmth. The kitten hardly moved. Luna sat nearby, her ears twitching and golden eyes focused on me, as if she understood how serious the situation was. I felt the heavy weight of responsibility settle in. This wasn't just about taking in stray animals, it felt like a matter of life and death. I wanted to help, but I was now confronted with the harsh truth that not every rescue ends well. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her. As I held Shadow, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Sarah, usually calm, seemed uneasy. "You're doing everything you can," she reassured me, though her words felt somewhat empty. "But remember, we can't control everything. We can only give her a chance." I nodded in agreement, but it still didn't feel like enough. Luna was walking in circles, her gaze darting between me and her kittens. I noticed Sarah trying to hide her worry, but it was clear she felt just as scared as I did. "What if she doesn't make it?" I asked softly, barely able to voice the thought. "Then we did our best," Sarah replied, but her shaking hands as she prepared a warm compress for Shadow told me she wasn't fully convinced either. In that moment, I realized how much this experience was transforming me. I had signed up to be a rescuer, but I hadn't anticipated the weight of the responsibility that would come with it. I had always viewed rescuing animals as a kind gesture, a straightforward act of giving them a home. But this felt different. This was about life, not just a mission to help. The stakes were higher than I had ever thought possible. I looked at Luna, who was fixated on Shadow. She didn't need me to explain what was happening. She sensed it too. She wasn't giving up, and neither was I. The following days blurred together. I took Sarah's advice, keeping Shadow warm and feeding her with a syringe to get some nutrients into her tiny body. I spent hours researching how to care for newborn kittens, hoping earnestly that I was doing it right. Whiskers, Ginger, and even Luna seemed to be doing well, but the fear loomed over me like a dark cloud. Would Shadow survive? Yet that wasn't my only concern. Mrs. Thompson, our elderly neighbor who fed the local strays, noticed the kittens one afternoon. "Jake, those cats been in your place?" she asked, her tone curious. I nodded. "Yeah, they've been here for a few days now." Her expression changed, becoming more serious. "I don't want any cats around here. My porch is already filled with strays, and they're not helping the neighborhood. You'd better figure out how to get rid of them before they cause some trouble." I wasn't sure how to reply. Mrs. Thompson had been nice to me before, but this felt different. She wasn't just sharing her thoughts, she was giving me a choice. Either I needed to remove the cats, or I'd face her complaints. I couldn't just abandon the kittens now. They were still so small and helpless. Yet I felt the pressure building. I was already worried about whether Shadow would pull through, and now I had to think about the future of the cats. As I pondered Mrs. Thompson's words, unease crept in. Throwing the cats away wasn't an option. They relied on me, and Luna had trusted me with her kittens. Still, I understood where Mrs. Thompson was coming from. The neighborhood already had too many strays, some of which had invaded her garden and wrecked her plants. I couldn't ignore the bond I was forming with these kittens. I had never considered myself a cat person, but it was becoming hard to think about parting with them. Ginger would leap into my lap, purring away as if she'd always belonged there. Whiskers was the little explorer, checking out every corner of the house, his curious eyes following me wherever I went. Even Shadow, fragile as he was, would gently nudge my fingers as if to say, "Thank you for helping me." Yet, I began to question my motivations. Was my attachment genuine, or was I acting out of selfishness? What would happen if I couldn't keep them? Should I adopt them, or was that a recipe for future pain? I found myself torn between wanting to care for them and facing my own limits. Just when I thought I might have things sorted out, a new challenge appeared, one that took me completely by surprise. It happened 2 days after Shadow had begun to show signs of improvement. I was in the backyard, checking on Luna and her kittens, when I heard a rustling from the bushes at the yard's edge. Initially, I assumed it was another stray cat, and anxiety surged through me. But when I turned around, I was met with a sight that was even more alarming. A neighbor's dog, a big, scruffy terrier, had managed to escape his yard and was running straight toward the kittens. His loud, frantic barking startled Luna, sending her into a panic. I watched in fear as the dog lunged toward the basket where the kittens were peacefully sleeping. Without thinking twice, I dashed toward the dog, shouting, "No, get away from them!" I barely reached him in time, grabbing his collar and pulling him away with all my strength. My heart raced as I quickly checked on the kittens, thankfully shaken but unharmed. Luna had already scooped them up in her mouth, moving them to a safer corner of the yard. But the dog wasn't finished. His owner, Mrs. Jensen from 2 houses down, rushed over, apologizing in a flurry. "I'm so sorry, Jake. He's never done this before." I felt a wave of anger mixed with disbelief. What if I hadn't been there? What if the kittens had been hurt? The questions lingered in my mind, making me wonder how I could protect them from more threats in the future. In the aftermath of the dog incident, the mood around the kittens shifted. Luna became even more vigilant, watching every inch of the yard like a hawk. She rarely left the kittens' side, ensuring they were either snuggled under a blanket or tucked safely inside the house. It seemed as though she understood the world was risky for her little ones, and she was determined to keep them safe. But it wasn't just Luna who changed. I began to notice a growing bond between myself and the kittens. Every time I fed them or cleaned their bedding, it felt like I was doing more than just chores. I was becoming part of their little world. Whiskers would curl up on my lap, purring happily whenever I sat down. Ginger would rub against my legs, vying for my attention. Even Shadow, once so timid, started following me around, her soft mews persistent as she sought closeness. Initially, I thought it was merely my duty that kept me around, since I had promised to care for them. But as the days went on, I realized something deeper was developing, a true connection. They had come to feel like family, which made the weight of my choices feel heavier. What would happen if I couldn't keep them? One evening, I found myself discussing the future with Sarah. "Do you think I could adopt them all?" I asked, my voice laced with uncertainty. She looked at me with understanding in her eyes, knowing just how much these little ones meant to me. "Jake, if you're curious, you might already have a sense of what's happening." As the days passed, I found myself caught in a struggle between my desire to care for the kittens and the harsh reality that I might not be able to provide them with everything they needed. Luna and her little ones were doing well, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control of the situation. Mrs. Thompson had been increasingly vocal about her concerns regarding the cats, and her remarks felt like pressure. "I'm not saying you need to get rid of them right now," she stated just yesterday, "but you should really start thinking about what's best for the neighborhood." The urgency in her tone hit me hard, as if there was an unspoken deadline looming. It was becoming increasingly difficult to brush aside the growing tension. Then I received a call from Leo, the vet, which added another layer of uncertainty. "Jake, you need to bring in Luna and the kittens," Leo said, combining calmness with urgency. "We've noticed some signs that could develop into a bigger issue if not treated promptly." In that moment, I felt frozen. What more could possibly go wrong? Worry began to creep in, accompanied by a knot in my stomach. Was I really ready for this? Walking into the vet's office, I was struck by just how much I had come to care for them. Letting them go would be heartbreaking. However, as Leo began tests on Luna and the kittens, doubt seeped in. Was I truly doing the right thing? The reality of their uncertain future loomed over me, and I felt powerless. When the test results arrived, the news was disheartening. Luna and her kittens had contracted a parasite, which could be treated effectively if caught early. However, this called for a strict medication routine, and Leo raised concerns. If I couldn't adhere to the plan or keep them isolated and safe, the consequences could be severe. I understood clearly. The stakes had just risen. Sitting quietly in the small exam room, I found my gaze fixed on the paperwork Leo had handed me. The weight of the situation pressed down on me heavily. Luna's trusting green eyes met mine, while her kittens played innocently on the floor, unaware of the danger they faced. "Jake," Leo said, pulling me out of my thoughts, "you need to ask yourself, are you able to manage this? Can you provide what they require, or should you consider finding them a different home?" The very idea of finding them another home felt unbelievable. After everything we had experienced together, the thought of letting them go felt unimaginable. But then reality set in. I knew I couldn't keep them forever. I was struggling to manage my own life, and taking care of 4 demanding kittens was beyond my capacity. I don't know, I murmured, my voice trembling. I thought I could do this, but now I'm not so sure. Leo nodded gently, understanding in his eyes. It's all right to feel that way, Jake, but it's better to decide now than to wait until it's too late. I found myself at a pivotal moment. The days after our visit to the vet were filled with uncertainty. I tried my best to follow the treatment plan, giving the kittens their medications. However, the pressure from every angle was starting to weigh me down. My tension with Mrs. Thompson continued to rise. Each time I encountered her, her impatience seemed to remind me that my time was running out. At home, the kittens grew more playful and affectionate. Watching them bond with Luna only deepened my internal struggle. Luna had placed her trust in me, and I couldn't help but feel attached to all of them. Yet the uncertain future loomed overhead, challenging my ability to manage everything. It wasn't just about whether I could keep them, it was about what was truly best for them. Was it appropriate to keep them in my small home? Wouldn't they thrive better in a stable environment with a dedicated family? One evening, as I sat on the couch observing the kittens playfully chase each other, I faced a realization I had been avoiding. I was scared. Scared of failing them, of disappointing them, and of making the heart-wrenching decision to let them go. Jake, you really need to decide, Sarah said, breaking the silence. This can't go on indefinitely. The moment had arrived. I had to confront the reality ahead. The question wasn't just whether I was prepared, it was about whether they were ready for whatever came next. The time for the final decision was at hand. It felt like a pivotal moment stretching out endlessly before me. I had spent the past few weeks worrying and hoping, but now I had to confront the truth. The kittens had thrived under my care, but the question still stood. What would come next? That evening, after the final kitten was fed and nestled into its cozy bed, I found myself alone in the living room. Luna lay peacefully at my feet, her watchful eyes reflecting a deep understanding. I felt utterly drained, both physically and emotionally. Yet as I sat there, the burden of my uncertainty started to ease. I thought about Mrs. Thompson's constant urging, Leo's well-intended guidance, and the vet's concerns about my ability to meet their needs. More importantly, I reflected on the connection I had built with these little creatures. They had transformed from mere animals into beloved family members. Despite the affection I felt for them, I understood the reality of the situation. Keeping them in my small home wasn't a viable long-term solution. They deserved a better life. Making the right choice often proves challenging, but I knew in my heart that the best path for them was to find a safe and loving environment. So, I made the difficult call. Leo agreed to assist with their adoption. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever faced, but as I glanced at Luna for what felt like the last time, I reassured myself that I was doing the right thing. They would have a shot at a life I couldn't provide, but a life they truly deserved. The weeks that followed carried a mix of emotions. Luna and her kittens were placed into a wonderful foster home where they could flourish. I visited them a few times, observing as they grew stronger and more confident. Luna remained a caring mother, yet her kittens slowly ventured to discover their own independence, each day drawing further away from the safety of their early days. I wish I could say that everything fell into place afterward, that letting them go was a straightforward decision without regret. The truth is, the heartache of that farewell lingered. I find myself reminiscing often, the way Whiskers would curl up comfortably in my lap, or how Ginger's loud purring felt like a gentle vibration in my chest. I can still picture Luna and the trust reflected in her eyes. Rescue isn't just about the joy, it also involves making tough choices, often without clear answers, and prioritizing the well-being of these animals, even when it feels like losing a piece of yourself. Now, the kittens are thriving in their new homes, and Luna has been enveloped in the love of a family that cherishes her. I may not have held on to them, but I helped give them the opportunity for a life filled with love and security. And perhaps that's what truly counts at the end of the day. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice, maybe about saving an animal or letting it find its own way? I'm curious to know what you think, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, consider liking, sharing, or subscribing for more uplifting rescue stories. I appreciate you being here and joining me on this journey.